introduce you. Okay, here we go. This is Arthur Bush, and we're at Radio Free Flint. Today, my guest is not Robert Wise, Phillip Wise of Flint. Phillip is an author of a book, and his book is on the screen here called Fragile Delivery. And Fragile Delivery is a book about Operation Babylift, which took place in 1975 during the Vietnam War, and was a part of sort of a historic and tragic incident. And I'll let Phillip explain that, but we'll come back to your book in just a few minutes. But before we get going too far, as you're listening to this, we're going to hear a story about Phillip's adventure in Vietnam when President Gerald Ford directed the airlift of over 200, I think it was 230 babies who were orphans, most of whom had, they were Eurasians, they were both Vietnamese children and American children. So eventually this ended up in a tragedy, and I'll have Phillip explain that to us as we're going along. So Phillip, I'm glad to have you here and honored to finally meet you. I'm going to turn this off so I can see your face. There he is. There's Phillip. And Phillip, tell us why you wrote this book and what it is about the book that makes it special.
Hello there, Arthur. Thank you for having me. It's an honor. Well, I wrote the book back in 2012. It got to the point where I was collecting information and researching a lot of information about the baby lift and about the kids who had went on with their lives post baby lift. I just wanted to know what happened to some of them, and I decided since I was getting a little older, it's about time for me to get this book out before I start losing my memory. But anyway, I went on and published it, self-published in 2012 on Veterans Day.
Very good. Now, the book, you were in the United States Air Force.
Correct.
And so tell us a little bit about what happened that brought this to pass from your vantage point.
Well, I graduated from Flint Southwestern High School June of 1970. And of course, at that time, the Vietnam draft was on. And I had a draft classification. It was pretty high. But I figured since I had to go, I might as well go into an outfit that I would like. And I decided to enlist in the United States Air Force. November 2nd, 1970, that was my enlistment day. I left for Flint and flew into San Antonio, Texas, Lackland Air Force Base. That's where I started my basic training. And after basic training, I went to technical school, which is a medical training school. It's Shepherd Air Force Base, Wichita Falls, Texas. And after graduating from tech school, I was assigned to Lackland Air Force Base again as a permanent party, where I worked in the hospital known as Big Willie. It's the hospital Wilfer Hall Medical Center. At the time, it was the largest Air Force hospital in the United States. So I worked there 2.5 years, and I got a chance to meet a guy that was based at Clark Air Force Base in the Philippines. And this guy became my supervisor. And every day he would talk to his girlfriend, who was living in the Philippines. So he would talk to her by way of Autobahn. This is a military phone that you can use for global global conversations around the world. And he would call his girlfriend every day. And I got to meet her over the phone. So one day, his name was excuse me, it was I can't think of his name right now, but it'll come to me. I'm sure.
That's all right. We don't need to know his name at this moment. Just tell us the
Yeah,
story.
well, he's no longer with us, but he's the one that got me orders. McDaniels, I'm sorry, Senior Master Sergeant McDaniel. He was my supervisor. Anyway, he got me. He said, "Phil, would you like to go to the Philippines?" That's just sure. That's better than going to Vietnam. So anyway, next thing I know, I had orders to go to flight school at Brooks School of Aerospace Medicine there in San Antonio, Texas, with orders after graduation for assignment to Clark Air Force Base, Philippines. And that's what happened. I graduated from flight school and was assigned to Clark Air Force Base, Philippines. And that base was designed for aeromedical evacuation missions that took place all over Southeast Asia, including countries such as Vietnam, Thailand, other countries, Japan, Korea, Taiwan. So I had missions all over Southeast Asia, and that's how I got to go to Vietnam. And we would go to Vietnam 2 or 3 times a month, and of course we would get combat pay each time we go in there to airlift troops out of there.
I see. And then in 1975, there came an order that you go to Vietnam. And how did you recount that for us a little bit? Where were you at when you got that order? It was a controversial thing, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was an unforgettable time for me because during that time, the fall of Vietnam was pretty imminent. And we had heard that we call them Charlies, the North Vietnamese, they were moving down towards Saigon, getting closer and closer to Saigon. And at that time, there was this civilian airline company called World Airways, which was contracted by our government to make rice drops all over Vietnam and Cambodia, Laos. And this guy, the owner of the World Airways, was Ed Daly. Well, Ed Daly, during his rice dropping runs, he would fly into Da Nang and make a drop. And then he would notice that there was a backup of people just gathering there at the airport trying to escape the Da Nang area, because Da Nang is like midway between North Vietnam and South Vietnam, Saigon. Anyway, Da Nang was becoming overran with orphans and refugees, and all trying to get to Saigon to get out of the country. So at that time, Ed Daly realized that something big was happening. So all those folks that was trapped in Da Nang needed to be airlifted. So Ed used his World Airway aircraft to airlift the first orphans out of Da Nang into Saigon. That was the unofficial start of Operation Babylift. And once that first load of kids were airlifted into Saigon, Ed Daly made a controversial airlift out of Saigon and flew one of his aircraft into Oakland, California, Presidio. He was unauthorized to bring those kids there. And that was the beginning of the Operation Babylift. So once President Ford found out about Ed Daly's Babylift run, he decided to get involved. And that was on April 4th that he made a pronouncement that Saigon was about to fall, and there was over 3,000 Amero-Asian orphans that were trapped in Saigon that needed to be airlifted out of there. So therefore, the first official Operation Babylift mission occurred, and I was on that mission. And of course, at that time, when I got word of me being on a mission, I was just about off duty. And our duty hours, I was on an alert mission, which starts at 0700 hours one morning to 0700 hours the next morning. So at 0655 the next morning, I was alerted to fly. So I kind of didn't believe that I had to fly. So I went to my CQ charge of quarters and called my squadron. to verify whether or not that I've been alerted to fly, knowing that I only had 15 minutes left for duty hours. Not 15 minutes, but 5 minutes left for duty hours. So I called the squadron and said, yes, Sergeant Wise, you've been alerted to fly. So normally we keep our bags packed for alert mission. So I had my bags packed. I called a taxi, and I had the taxi drop me off at the flight line, which was normal. So when I reached the flight line, and I saw the aircraft that I normally fly on, which is a DC-9 Nightingale. It's a DC-9 with the Red Cross emblem on the tail of it. So I saw this DC-9 with the engines rearing, ready to taxi. So I'm running up to the aircraft, trying to catch them before they take off. So they stopped the aircraft and opened up the door and said, Sergeant Wise, what can we do for you? I told them, well, I've just been alerted to fly, and I'm supposed to be on this mission with you. So, oh, no, this is just a training mission. We're going to go up and turn around and come back. So at that point, I was kind of feeling a little happy because I thought maybe I was off duty. So I ended up going inside the squadron, and I got inside the squadron building, and I noticed a very somber feeling all throughout the building. And no one knew exactly what was going on. But I kept going to the control center trying to find out if I was off duty or not. They said, no, well, just hold tight, Sergeant Wise. We're going to assemble a briefing real soon. So maybe 2 hours passed, and by that time, the wing commander, base commander, they all assembled in the briefing room. And that's when we learned that President Ford had ordered Operation Babylift, and the Saigon was about to fall. And to my surprise, that we were not going to use the DC-9 Nightingale. We were going to use the C-5A Galaxy that had just flown in from Georgia. So we was all shocked about that. So we had to learn quickly.
Why were you shocked by it?
Because we were shocked because our normal aircraft was the DC-9, which was designed for medical evacuation. I mean, we had an ICU unit on the aircraft. We had litter patients set up for transporting litter patients. It was designed for air medical evacuation. And the C-5A Galaxy was a cargo aircraft. So what the commander's thinking was that we were going to Vietnam and use our largest aircraft that we have to evacuate as many babies out of there as we could for the first mission. And we were told that President Ford was going to welcome these orphans to America because he was going to meet us there at Travis Air Force Base, California. And our mission was to go into Saigon, pick these kids up, come back to Clark, refuel, and then fly into Travis Air Force Base, California. And that's how that began.
So eventually this plane was full of kids, and there wasn't the adequate kind of safety precautions on that plane that normally would take place in a plane that was suited up for kids that were in rough shape. And these kids are on the floor and other places.
Well, what happened was these kids, once we arrived in Saigon, of course, we would, prior to landing, we went over what we need to do once we touched down in Saigon and who would work in what sections of the C5. And my title was the senior medical technician. And my job was to assign other techs to work in different sections of the aircraft. So once we got to Saigon, we decided that we would load the infants first. And once we arrived there, we saw bus loads of infant kids on the tarmac lined up to be airlifted out of there. And
how old were these children? What was the age range?
Now, the age range from 2 days old, 1 day old, 1 year old, up until early adolescent age. And we had to separate the kids. Now, the C-5A Galaxy was designed where the troop compartment, which is the passenger section, is upstairs in the upper level. And the lower level is the cargo section. So it's a two-tier aircraft. So what we did, we put the infants, 1 day old up to 3 years old, in the troop compartment, upper level, and we placed them two per seat, two patients or babies per seat, and we had approximately 77 to 80 seats upstairs with two children per seat. And the older kids, the 4, 5, 6 on up, they were placed in the lower section in cargo, and where we placed military blankets on the cargo on the floor, cargo floor, and we used a catwalk, which is seats along the parallel to the sidewall, and we used the older strap those kids there, and the litter patients and the older adults were placed on the floor. Now we had over 40 Department Defense Attaché Office employees volunteering to help transport these kids back to America. So we had about 40 women that volunteered this service to help take care of these kids, and they all were down below in the cargo section along with me.
So eventually the plane takes off, and then there gets to be a problem in flight, correct?
Correct. We loaded up. We get airborne. Approximately 15 minutes into flight, we had a problem. All of a sudden, there was a loud explosion, and when I looked back, me being on the bottom, I looked back. I saw the rear cargo doors and ramp rip off in flight at 24,000 feet in the air. So I saw that going on at the time, and I looked out. I saw the ladder that leads to the upstairs to the troop compartment. I saw it dangling, just about ready to break loose and go out the rear end. But everything in the back that was placed there on pallets went out with the doors. So I saw the blue skies, white clouds, and all the debris that was sucked out at the time.
And that included people.
Yes, that included people. And so at that time, we were in the midst of a rapid decompression. So everything was just being tossed about, and I heard a lot of screaming and yelling.
Which meant there wasn't enough oxygen in the plane to support life.
Correct. The oxygen that we had in the cargo went out with the doors. Yeah. Unlike upstairs in the troop compartment, where they had fallout masks, just like a commercial plane.
Correct. But in some of the news reports that I reviewed before I start talking to you today, it said that the masks that were available, many of them didn't work. There weren't enough, and so people were falling out, or they oxygen.
Now, to upstairs, so a few of them didn't work from what I was told, but the crew had to oxygenate themselves first and then give it to the kids, because right. They would don the mask and give themselves oxygen, and give the kids oxygen until we got below sea level. Sea level was at 10,000 feet.
So eventually the plane goes down.
Now you got to remember, for us downstairs, we didn't have the fallout mask. We had walk-around bottles, which was stationary. That meant you had to leave your position, go get them. So during the rapid decompression, we were unable to get any type of oxygen.
Right.
So the pilot, once the rapid decompression occurred and when the doors blew off, it tore apart the hydraulics, which helped navigate the plane. So we remember, we was over the South China Sea at 25,000 feet when the doors blew off. So he tried to turn around and come back to the base at Tonson Air Force Base, Saigon. So once we turned around and tried to make it back to the base, the pilot knew he couldn't make it because we were going way too fast. So he decided to try to bring it down in this rice field, rice paddies. So what he did, he descended down far enough where he clipped a tree line heading toward the runway, but it was too short. So he ended up clipping the tree line, and we bellied down on one side of the Saigon River, and we went airborne. Once we bellied, we went airborne for about a quarter mile, and we just barely cleared the other side of the Saigon River. and that's when the aircraft started breaking apart. Now, it bounced and bounced, and of course the aircraft broke apart, and debris was scattered for miles. Now, remember, we had people down below, so everybody downstairs didn't make it. So, because we absorbed the impact, the initial impact.
So I'm showing a picture right now of the debris field. It was quite extensive.
Yeah, that what you're seeing now, that's where I was. I was on the cargo. That's what's left of the cargo section.
Wow. And Philip, this is what, oops, I'm trying to get this up here for you. What section is this?
This is that's the cargo section. That's where it rolled over to a side, and that area there, that's where I was evacuated to from the debris that I was entangled in. I was told that I was found hanging upside down, my left leg entangled in cable wires.
But you were still alive, and obviously you were injured.
Well, they wanted to save my body so it wouldn't burn, because I was trapped in a burning wreckage. And they just thought they'll save my body so it wouldn't char. And they got to untangling me and realized that I was still alive. And they untangled me, and then they moved me to the area where you're showing this picture in a triage situation. So where they evacuated the most severe to least severe. So I was one of the first to be evacuated from the crash site.
What was going through your mind at that point? I think you described to some journalists that you were unconscious at one point.
Yeah, at that time I was unconscious. I didn't know what was going on. I was only know what was told to me. But I was told that I wouldn't stay still. I kept trying to crawl back into the wreckage. And one of the pilot, Bud Trainer, he said I wouldn't stay still, and I was shivering because we were in the rice paddies where they fertilized the paddies with all sorts of manure, carabao manure stuff. So I had all these open wounds exposed to this bacteria-infested area, and the pilot said I was shivering, so obviously infection was setting in. So he took a blanket off of a lady that he thought was dead, and we took the blanket off her, and she opened her eyes. So that was pretty scary. But anyway, I was eventually evacuated to the Seventh-day Adventist Hospital there in Saigon, and was treated.
Yeah. Now, Bud Trainer, he signed this picture, didn't he?
Yes, Bud Trainer. He's my hero. He brought it down best he could, and of course, the wreckage. I was told at the time I was the only survivor that survived the lower level cargo section of that plane crash, and we only lost 2 babies in the troop compartment out of nearly 180. And and I was told we lost nearly 200 people on that lower level. And then years later, I found out there was a kid that survived the cargo section who has suffered severe brain damage.
What's going on in this picture here, Philip?
Oh, that's those kids are being evacuated from the crash site. And that one lady, and the blonde lady, her name is Christy Lieberman. I haven't seen her since the early 80s. But those kids were being evacuated from the crash site into the Seventh-day Adventist Hospital in Saigon. And that's where I was. That's where I was evacuated to and treated.
And let's see if I can make it come up here. And this is same thing.
That's another view of the entrance to the emergency. There's Seventh-day Adventist hospitals.
So they're evacuating these people to the hospital. And is this when you're beginning to take off?
No, that's the how it looked down below in the cargo section where I was. As you can see, the defense attaché office volunteers, they all seated on the floor, taking care of the kids. And as you can see, the older kids are positioned along the catwalk in the catwalk seats.
So this is before the plane takes off.
Right, that's where I was. That's where I was positioned, correct.
And let's see if I've got them all here. Well, it looks like you've got a bunch of other pictures going on here. I'm not sure what they all are.
Yeah, well, you go to my website, fragiledelivery.com, you'll see a number of photos. Now, that photo there, you're showing, that's when I returned to Vietnam to the crash site. And every 5 years, I go to Vietnam to honor my crew members who lost their lives on April 4th, 1975. And picture was taken on the 35th anniversary of the plane crash. And that lady happened to live in the area where the crash site. She's one of the villagers, so she went to her house and bought back that panel, which happened to be some sort of installation on the C5 that she kept all those years. And I took a picture with it, and she broke me off a little piece for my keepsake.
And who
And
are we?
that's myself. That was on Safi. She was 6 months old, who survived the upper level of the plane crash. Her name is Safi. And then all the others with her, they all survived the upper level of the plane crash. So that was 30 years later.
30 years later, that's one of the ones that you were involved in evacuating from Vietnam, who was an orphan at the time?
Correct.
Wow. Amazing. And then what does this picture depict?
Oh, that was when I received the Airman's Medal. The Airman's Medal I was given for heroism during the fall of Saigon, the crash site, and that's the General Carlton, P.K. Carlton, Paul K. Carlton, 4-star general. He escorted me off the parade field once he pinned my medal on, and that photo happened to make the Air Force Times.
And in that photo, you're using a cane to assist because you were injured.
Yeah, I was in the hospital. I was released from the hospital to attend the ceremony to receive my medal. And after the ceremony, I went back to the hospital where I spent 6 months recovering.
And I guess there's a few other pictures here I could show, but not to belabor all the pictures. It's an amazing story. I guess I put a couple others up here of your comrades.
Oh, those are my crew members. All the three, Marcy Wirt on the left, Olin Botwell, myself, and Colonel Ani, Regina Ani. We all survived it. Now, Olin is no longer with us, but Marcy and Harry and Regina were nurses, flight nurses. Olin and I were med techs. And as a matter of fact, Olin ended up flying the very next day, so he wasn't injured. I was the one severely injured because I was on the lower level. And that's Kim. That's Kim. He's one of the orphans that survived the upper level. We were in Vietnam. That's the same time I showed you where you saw the photo of me with a picture of that panel from the C5.
Right.
Yeah, he's from Sweden. He was adopted to a family that lives in Sweden.
What goes through your mind when you met him? What were your thoughts?
Well, meeting Safi and Kim was so rewarding because I just wanted to get an idea of their thought process at the time of meeting me. They were so genuine and grateful for us saving their lives and giving them a chance at a new life in another world. So it was rewarding and very emotional. We cried, we hugged, and shed tears together, and it was very powerful. It meant the world to me, and I felt like when I go back to the Vietnam Veteran Memorial Wall, I could share those stories with my 11 crew members whose names are on the wall to let them know that these kids' lives that we saved, they really appreciate the sacrifices that were made.
And who's this young man here?
This is I can't think I can't think his name right now. It'll come to me. But we had a Babylift reunion in St. Louis, and St. Louis has a Ryan Calapi. St. Louis had a large Vietnam Babylift community there. So they had a reunion back in 2001 where I was invited to come there as a guest and as a guest speaker and share my story.
And you've in this picture is the medal pinning ceremony, I take it.
Yes, I don't know if you could see that. That's after the general pinned my medal on. They placed me in a chair right next to the parade podium. But that aircraft in the backdrop, that's a DC-9 Nightingale. That's the type of aircraft I normally fly on. And that picture there is when I returned to Vietnam in 2006. That that was a part of the C-5 wreckage that they made a memorial out of. So everybody that goes to the crash site, that's where they'll light incense and say prayers honoring the dead.
Mm-hmm. You've spoke quite a bit. It looked like here, even here in Michigan, you've. Before I go on to that, what is this?
Now this one here, the lady in the blue, that's Sister Susan, Sister Susan McDonald. She's the one who invited me to St. Louis to share my story in 2001. But she would put on these homecoming tours to Vietnam, where a lot of these kids can go back and find out what orphanage they came from, and she would share the stories and share with them the different orphanage that they were raised in. And here we are, all of us who survived the C-5, we embracing each other at the crash site where we lit incense, had prayers and sang songs honoring the deceased. And that's me at Scott Air Force Base, Illinois, where one of my crew members, Regina Ani, was honored. And I was one of the guests to attend the ceremony.
Well, Phillip, your story obviously is one that was covered by a lot of media. You've included some of these on your page. If people want to know more about this story, they can buy a book at Amazon called Fragile Delivery, Operation Babylift. And there are other media outlet that has interviewed Phillip and told his story. And I can't play these here because we don't have permission.
Yeah, that's trainer there you're looking at.
But Phillip's story was told on 2020 with Hugh Downs in the day. And it's quite an interesting video. And if the listeners want to go back to listen to more about Phil's story and Operation Babylift, you can do so by going to his website. So, Phillip, let's shift gears here for a minute, because not only are you an American hero who obviously sacrificed yourself for the lives of others and a chance to have a life, much less have a life in the United States. What was it about where you come from that gives you such courage and such humanitarianism?
Well, growing up in Flint, Michigan, it was on the south side of town. It was always activities going on, whether it was basketball, football, baseball. We always found something to do. And I was right there in the mix every day, playing horseshoes, playing basketball, football. And you just always was challenged within your neighborhood. And back then, only the strong survived. And I think I like to.
Phillip, your camera is a little bit off here. You know, Phillip, I've given several thousands of interviews, and I've learned now to appreciate the fact that they bring cameramen to interview sessions. And here we are in 2020, and it's me and you, and we have our own platform. And one of the great things about this platform is we have those moments. So we're authentic.
Right.
And we don't have to cut away for commercials either. So, Phillip, there was something about that South End ethic that you had. I mean, not only did you play hard, but you had a certain ethic of consideration of others and honor and duty to your country. I mean, those were things you must have learned in Flint.
Yes, my parents were very strict, and they made sure we did our homework, did our chores before we played, and that was customary for our household. And I was always a type of person that liked to work, and I like cutting grass, seniors' grass, or shoveling the seniors' snow, or going down the street to Michigan Lumber Company, working in the sawmills, or sweeping the floor at the lumber company. I was always there, and happened to become good friends with one of the owners of the Michigan Lumber Company, and he sort of took me under his wings, Howard Olson. So he instilled in me a lot of good values that I took on with me to the Air Force.
Now, you left the Air Force eventually after this incident. Were you discharged for medical reasons, or how did that come about?
The Air Force retired me medically in 1978 because of my injury. I was severely injured. So I got a medical retirement. And afterwards, I went to attended college after service. I went to Mott College and became a nurse, practical nurse. And ended up, that didn't work out well for me, so I ended up becoming a mailman.
Mailman?
Yes. Even with my injuries, I still managed to deliver that mail. I missed one day in 13 years.
Oh my gosh. And what areas were you delivering mail?
I pretty much worked all the Flints, south side, east side, north side, and went into supervision and management. But that was an experience.
Very good. And as we conclude here, you've told a hell of a story.
Well, I hope I didn't bore you.
Oh no, hell no. It was interesting and harrowing, the story is. But Phillip, as you look at your life, you look back on your life, you return back to your hometown.
Yes. I've promised my mom that as long as I'm living, I'll be here for her. And she's 90, she'll be 93 this year. And my dad passed in 2018, but he lived to be 94, almost 94. But I promised my parents that I would come back to Michigan to be around for them. The old saying, once a man, twice a child. So it's their turn to be taken care of.
Yeah. Well, you certainly have shown this type of character, and you've shown what a great American actually looks like.
Oh, this is so kind. Thank you, sir.
And you should be proud. And I know your mother and your dad must have been really proud of you for all that you've done for not just our country, but for all those kids. Phillip, I appreciate your time. I guess I'm a little choked up because I'm the son of a disabled veteran as well, and my dad was 100% disabled from the United States Air Force.
Really? Well, thank your dad for his service.
It brings back
how's he doing?
A lot of memories for me interviewing you, and to understand the sacrifice that you've endured, not just in Vietnam, but for the rest of your life. You've had the scars of war, and I must say, somebody like you is an inspiration. So, Phillip, nice to meet you. God bless you. And maybe we'll get a chance to interview you with some of your buddies from the South Side, and we want to learn a little bit more about some of the characters that you grew up with, because you grew up in a fascinating neighborhood.
All right. Well, I'd just like to thank you for all you're doing. Here in Flint, we appreciate you sharing the stories of our Flint Tights. We really appreciate it. We need to know more about our people, and And God bless you for all you're doing.
Thank you, Philip. And to our audience, it's time to take our tips and run on home. We hope all of you will stay home during this emergency that we have. It's probably just a little bit longer for patient. So if you can, stay home and try to avoid contact as much as you can. God bless you all and take care. This is Arthur Bush signing off for Radio Free Flint. Thank you.